All right. This is Clyde Haycraft, my father, and this is my second interview for rock and roll. All right. So, what city, state, and what year did you graduate from high school?
Grayson County, Kentucky, and Litchfield in 1984.
All right. So, when you were going to high school, growing up in those years, your teenage years, what kind of music was popular? Do you remember any specific artists or groups that had an impact on your high school and your friends?
A lot of hair bands, the rock and roll, and
Right.
one real popular song was Billy Squire.
The Stroke?
The Stroke. It was played at a lot of high school functions and pep rallies, stuff like that.
So Billy Squire was big. Anybody else in '84 or early '80s, from '80 to '84? When you were in high
Van
school.
Halen, ZZ Top, the Eliminator tour came out, I think, back then.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. I think it was a car on that album cover.
Legs, songs, I don't know, some of those songs, and of course Van Halen.
Right.
They were real popular too.
Okay.
A lot of songs that people listen to.
So
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how much were albums back then? Were they still vinyl in the '80s, or could you buy a CD? And did you buy singles or
They're
just a whole album most of the time? What
They-
would you pay for that?
most cassette tapes were
Cassette tapes.
the smaller cassettes. They had made transition from 8-tracks to cassettes, but mostly cassettes were popular then. And it was before they started making CDs. I think they started making some CDs maybe, but it was mostly cassettes.
Okay.
The little
So you could fit a whole album on a cassette, right?
yes.
And
Yeah,
do you
and they
remember
had-
what they would cost or something
They
like
had two sides. It depends on what artist and who's popular, of course. But I'd say anywhere from $12 to $18.
Wow.
It depends.
So that's probably what it is now, for an album. Well, like, how did you hear about your music, the new music that was coming on? Did you listen to the radio, TV, magazines, through friends? Like, how did you?
Radio, of course, MTV was real popular then, and
Yeah.
everybody watched MTV, but mostly radio.
Okay, awesome. What kind of music was played on the radio? Were there different stations for different genres, or was it kind of, what did you listen to? Because I know.
Well, they had, just like they do now, they had rock, classic rock, and then they had soft rock, and then they had your basic country
Okay.
stations. Just different stations, just depends on what you want to listen to.
Fair enough. Did you attend any live concerts, when you were growing up
Yes.
in the '80s? And can you describe what those were like? For example, like what a concert would cost, how long they would play for, what the security was like, beverage availability, drugs, etc.
There again, seating played a big factor in the artists you were watching. But I went to say AC/DC. It was like $30 some, and depending on where you sit, I'm sure they had tickets higher than that. But then it depends on where you played, which stadium. I mean, like in Louisville, they would serve alcohol. But I think I watched a couple of concerts in Roberts Stadium in Evansville, and they didn't at that time serve alcohol there. And yeah, you did see people smoking pot and stuff, but
Was the security very heavy at those concerts?
there was like down near the stage or whatever, there was more
So
than there was. But the higher up seats, going to the nosebleed, they weren't. But they played, I've seen Manic Cruz, I've seen several different, just depends. They would play, some would do encore, some of them would. One of
So how many hours would you say, even without an encore or with an encore? What do you think? 2, 3, 4 hours?
Between 2 and 3 hours, most of it. Without breaks. Of course, they would have opening acts, and then they would have probably most of the time the encore band would play. Or the headliner would play an encore, maybe of 3 songs after they played their main concert.
Did you go to any really big shows that were like remembered in the 80s, huge concerts or anything, or just some stuff that was local in Kentucky? Did you ever go out of state, travel for any?
Well, I went to Florida. I went to a few concerts there in Daytona Beach, Florida. I seen the Georgia Satellites, the Miami Sound Machine was there. Eddie Money was in concert there. I seen all 3 of them in Daytona. I've seen some in Indiana, like I say, mostly, but a lot of them in Kentucky.
Okay.
Mostly in Kentucky.
All right.
And one in Nashville.
Okay. Well, who'd you see in Nashville?
I can't remember which one it was. White Snake was in Evansville. It might have been. I don't remember which one it was. I went to several.
That's all right. What kind of music did your parents listen to or like when you were growing up?
Mostly country, gospel, country.
Okay.
They would listen to, like, Mom liked some of the 50s, rock and roll, and Elvis. Other than that, they mostly listen to country.
So how did they feel about you listening to rock and roll growing up? Did they know? Did they ever listen to it with you? Did they?
Well, some.
Was it controversial?
No.
How did they feel about it?
No, even my grandma Haycraft, even when back in the 70s, when I was, used to stay with her a lot, she listened to the radio with us, and we'd even call the local radio station and request songs.
That's
And
fun.
we'd have fun out of it.
So they're pretty open to the new music?
Yeah, they didn't. It wasn't, unless it was what Mom called screaming music. She didn't like hard rock, acid rock much, but all the other stuff, was like Journey and all those people.
Okay.
She didn't mind those at all.
What, if anything, was considered controversial about the popular music of the time? Are there like any specific events or personal memories that stand out to you? Like anything bad that happened that was traumatic that made the news, or anything controversial that any band did, or statements that they made? Anything in the 80s, early 80s?
Not that I can recall. Of course, a lot of the music, the videos were real popular, and I think that probably caused more controversy than anything, because they had a lot of scantily clad females on the videos, and they were, of course, a lot of people protested MTV and all the videos because they had provocative, dancing and scantily clad women on there and stuff. But as far as the music, they didn't really, say much about the music itself. It was just the videos more than anything.
Nothing that any of the bands did or anything. I know that Manic Cruz was kind of controversial. Some of the stuff that they did.
The Shout at the Devil thing, that their album, a lot of people thought they were devil worshippers, and of course, they used to have, at one time they had a controversy at one time. I remember when I was a kid or younger, when they was talking about backmasking, where they would play albums backwards.
Oh, yeah.
And they would say that they had subliminal messages in them, and that, but a lot of church groups was, saying all that, but I never played an album backwards in my life, so I don't know how they come up with all that stuff. But like Stairway to Heaven was one of them that was really controversial. They said, it's got, hidden messages if you play the thing backwards, but I don't know of anybody that's ever played it backwards.
That sounds controversial. That definitely counts. So what kind of musical, social, or cultural trends did you see in popular music as you grew older? Like, did you like what was happening? So from the 80s to the 90s, whenever alt rock became big and bands like Nirvana and you know, Alice in Chains or Pantera, those people. When rock kind of changed, what did you think about that? What kind of musical, social, and cultural trends did you see?
I didn't, of course, there was different trends going on back in music, like you had people following, just like you do now, different types of music. People went from the hair band kind of stuff to there was like a lot of break dancing stuff going on at that time. You know, that was kind of a trend too. And people parachute pants and all that
Hip-hop.
stuff. Hip hop and stuff. It was kind of a form of hip hop. It wasn't, you know, but it wasn't like it is now. You know, it's
Maybe like some Run DMC stuff.
but
or
it
something
was
like
kind of, you know. But now, but the alternative rock wasn't too, you know. Some of the real established bands like AC/DC, ZZ Top, Van Halen, those guys their music never did fade away. They just kind of, well, like Van Halen, they broke up, but never had no major change in that. But then, you know, later when the rap music came along, that kind of.
How did society change, you know? So let's talk about social. So leather jackets, you know, slicked hair, whatever, big perms. How did people start dressing differently as you went from the 80s to the 90s and when rock and stuff changed, and how did people start carrying themselves?
Well, in the early 80s, you know, like I said, there was that parachute pants, bandanas. People wore bandanas cut off, you know, the sleeveless shirts and stuff like that. And then it kind of transitioned to like the alternative rock. It was more like the Holy Jeans and all that stuff. The John Cougars, the Bruce Springsteen, you know, they were real popular. And blue jeans, t-shirts, you know, more of that kind. And then they had, of course, the hip hop culture. You know, they just
right
wore whatever, I guess. But as far as the rock and roll was concerned, you know, they kind of went back to kind of almost like the 50s, you know, because like I say, Bruce Springsteen, he became real popular, and they said he was going to be the next Elvis and all this, which he could write a lot of songs, and, you know, but he was more of a blue jeans and white t-shirt wearing kind of guy, so a lot of people mimicked that, and then,
definitely,
you know, and they
that
got
album
away
cover,
from,
yeah.
and they got away from the big hair, the headbands, you know, like the Def Leppards and the Rat and all those bands back in the hair days. They wore, you know, and they'd tie bandanas around their arms, and people would do that. Of course, and then the gangs come along, and they said that was a gang symbol, but it was just a fad, just like.
Did you like what was happening, or didn't bother you? Didn't whatever.
Me,
Fair enough. So, are you familiar with popular music of today in 2020? If yes, like which artists, bands do you enjoy and why? If no, can you pinpoint when or why you stopped, you know, being interested in current music today? You know, compared to music today, is there anything that you like compared to whenever you were growing up in the 80s? Or do you just not care for today's music at all? Is there anybody, you know, that any artists or bands that you like?
I listen to more country than anything now, and I like some of the country music, but a lot of the country music that they play now is not really country music. It's kind of like pop country, and I don't like that as much. You know, some of the stuff that they call country's not, and then the old, you know, rock and roll, I still like it, and I don't know that there's very many new bands that.
Is there any artist or anything that stick out to you? Somebody that you enjoy listening to from today's time? Nobody?
Not really. I mean, I like the older, the 80s stuff.
That's fair enough.
I still like, you know, Bob Seger, Bruce Springsteen, those guys, John Mellencamp, you know, their music, and then some of the alternative rock I like.
So when did you start losing interest? What decade? Or in anything in the newer genre of music? The newer.
I mean, I still appreciate good music, and I appreciate all kinds of music, even bluegrass or whatever. If it's gospel, whatever it is, rock and roll. If it's done well, I like it. But a lot of the stuff that they call music nowadays, I don't think it's, just like rap. I don't think none of that, it all don't sound like music to me. It's just, I can't understand half of it, and a lot of it's just not for me. I mean, it's just cussing and rhyme and carrying on, and some of the beats of the songs robbed from other songs, and it's just not my style at all. I like people that can sing, people that can play instruments, and that has talent. That even though some of those guys might seem like they're far-fetched and more makeup and big hair, they could still play the guitar. They could,
they had to have it all.
They still had a sound and had their own sound, and they didn't mimic nobody else's. They made their own.
Sure. So this kind of touched on what you just said, but is the music you enjoyed while growing up still the music you enjoy listening to today? And obviously the answer is yes. And do you genuinely love the music? Is it something that when you hear it, you're like, man, this is great music, I'm thankful for this, or is it more nostalgic memories? And if the answer is no, why don't you listen to music anymore? Obviously you listen to music still, so do you love the music, or is it more nostalgia?
I mean, I guess I love good music. I mean, I like that era of, like I said, because of the just bring back memories too. I mean, it's both, but and I still appreciate it. And there's some good music out there today, but there's not as much. I don't think there's a lot more types, but not
the quality's not there.
The quality, I don't think, and for me, of course, I'm older.
Yeah, no, you're entitled.
53 years old, and it
definitely.
Unless you listen to country, and like I said, a lot of the country now is not really country. A lot of the stuff that they sing, and if country is slower, you can listen to the words more, and it's just a lot of it is just not good. And even though some are talented musically, they can play the instruments, but they're still not making good music.
Records that'll last forever. I understand it's kind of more temporary hits, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you. So the last person I interviewed, obviously the standout artist from the 50s would be, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Elvis, Buddy Holly. If you go into the 60s, you have, and people remember those guys forever. And you go into the 60s, you have the Stones, the Beatles, the Beach Boys. People remember that, especially the Beatles, and the Stones. The Stones are freaking still touring, and they started making music in the 60s. And then the 70s, we talked about, Led Zeppelin was big. People will always remember that. Stevie Wonder. People still know who Stevie Wonder is. Elton John. The Eagles, The Who. But more so, Led Zeppelin and Stevie Wonder, people like that. So from the 80s, is there anybody that really stood out and that you think people will remember for years to come? It's the 50s were a long time ago. Everybody knows who Elvis is. So is it like that with the 80s? Is there any band that you think people will remember in 20, 30 years from now?
I think so, but like Van Halen, Def Leppard, all those bands were real popular as far as the rock side of it. But pop music was, coming to its own then, and like Michael Jackson, that Thriller album, it was off the charts, and I think everybody will always remember that.
For sure.
It'll be,
That's a good point.
It'll be legendary forever because of what it did, and how many people bought the album and how it sold, and then that type of music then was still kind of music you could listen to. It wasn't too over the top. It was a different style, but people still enjoyed it. The people that listened to rock could listen to the pop, but now the pop and it's totally different. It's too it's just way too. It's all these dance move kind of music now, and people don't. It's not for me.
All right, well, I appreciate your time, and I think that'll sum up our interview.